Last season, Th0masHD did double the damage of Trippern in the mid-game. Now to the newbies, that may sound like Trippern isn't pulling his weight in the team, but you can't just solo clutch your way to winning 4 events and placing 3rd in the FNCS finals. So let's take a look at the interesting dynamic of this duo. Their drop spot of choice is still Rave Cave. Obviously last time this was called Command Cavern. They still land to the south side of this on the Slurp Truck, but this season they're generally uncontested there because there's not as much to fight for on this side of the drop. By this point they know the looting paths relatively efficiently. However, one thing to note here is that they don't harvest that many materials. Now I would say this would be a classic mistake, but they know what they're doing. Notice after they've looted a small amount of the south side, they instantly start pushing over towards the northwest where a contesting team is because they want to take a fight. I love that they have a really good understanding of the terrain around them and set themselves up in a really good pinch position, just waiting for the other team to walk right into them. Trippern plays a great role here of sneaking up behind the opponents, and notice how he's holding down his ADS as he does this while crouch walking, because this actually completely removes any footstep audio that you make. Now notice as soon as he takes the first shot, he follows up the SMG, but doesn't quite knock them straight away. But of course he understands that there's 2 players still in this box, so he instantly backs out into his own box and places a wall between him. And because he's created such a good pinch with Th0masHD coming in at the side, this is when Th0masHD will start to spray in and eventually pick up both of these eliminations. Sure, on the board it looks like Th0masHD has done much more because he has both of the elims, but the way this fight was set up from Trippern was so good. Now I said earlier it might have been a mistake the fact that they didn't harvest the amount of materials, and for most people out there that would be true, but they were setting up what would be a very quick fight where they were going to take advantage of the fact that the other players had harvested their materials, and then once they've won this fight they'll just instantly get refreshed, not wasting any of their time harvesting too many materials for themselves. Since they took this fight, they now have roughly 400 storm surge damage already, and since they've pulled the first zone, now they can spend the time to loot the additional chests, ammo boxes, grapple gloves, and of course the vault while they're in here. Whilst opening the vault, there's 2 really nice efficiencies that they use. Notice how Th0masHD, whilst waiting for this to open, is harvesting the brick down below, which again is something he didn't waste time doing before this. Similarly, while looting the vault, they do the exact same thing on the metal floors down below. Again, metal's generally quite slow harvesting, so this would have wasted a bunch of time had they harvested this elsewhere. When leaving the vault, they also then ensure they're fully protected. It's very common for players to start holding people in the vault, but notice how much protection they had and the fact that they're looking through this cone and then actually go up rather than going out the door that they came in. All of this additional time spent in their POI of course gives them tons of heals, but most importantly a lot of ammo. As you notice, Th0masHD leaves with 410. Remember though, had they not taken that fight in the early game, they wouldn't have had the surge, meaning they would have had to leave earlier. Since they got that damage early on, it opens up a world of possibilities on the positions they can go. So if you notice, they decide to go up to the northwest and take a dead side position away from everyone else because they don't need to be around all of the other players since they already have all of their damage. And I love the way that they base up here, and then it's Trippern who goes down to get a bunch of the brick to re-farm it, whereas Thomas stays up. Now this is playing into the fact that Th0masHD has basically the best aim in the world and he has the burst AR, meaning that he's set up in the position to get more tags if needed. You must understand each player's strengths and put them in a position to capitalize on that, even if it's something as simple as just when you're going to refarm, the guy with the best aim stays up on top. And loadout of course was important in this too. You see that Thomas has the burst, whereas Trippern has the hammer AR, which gives them the spray potential and the long range damage. But one thing you'll notice is they actually both aren't carrying SMGs, which leads to an interesting problem we'll talk about in endgame. Now they pull the 3rd zone, but again, because they're on the dead side of the zone, they don't need to make a risky play at this point to move anywhere towards the middle. They can just stay on the far edge because they know that there's not that many players between them and the center of the next zone. They can just stay here and continue to get tags on the few players who are around them. But at this moment, they're not wasting any time. Notice how Trippern always shoots down a bunch of the trees, he's shooting in bushes, he's shooting out these rocks that always fall on them because he is planning the rotate ahead of time. If he has to go to the south, the trees are already shot down, so opponents can't shoot that down on them, and if he has to go to the east, the falling rock can't be used against them as well. Similarly, if there's anyone in these bushes or around, these trees will fall on them and give them easy storm surge damage. This entire strat of going to the dead side of the zone and also just shooting out all of this falling mobility would not be possible if they didn't have as much AR ammo from looting in Rave Cave for as long as they did. So remember, every single decision they've made here was a result of taking that early game fight. So the 4th zone appears and it's a max distance rotate for them. So this is where their first real challenge of the game begins. They need to decide how to make this rotate. So they decide to rotate down to the south, and notice how they don't take the slipstreams at all. This is because there's an opponent team boxed up right on the hill next to it, meaning that they'll just get beamed out of the sky and probably die early. Instead, they basically follow along underneath this, using one use of their grapple glove to get themselves into the next zone and a couple of materials. The second challenge this game comes in a max distance 5th zone. Now again, because they have the grapple gloves, they wait until the zone starts to move and then both use around 4 uses each to get in. However, because of the cooldown timer on the grapple gloves, they do also have to commit a bunch of mats here, but regardless, they're in a really good position going into the moving zones. Now, when you're using the grapple glove in the endgame, there's one really important thing that you need to do, and that is stay to a high layer. Notice how they actually build up before using the grapple glove to start with to give themselves a little bit of an elevated layer to swing from. Then, as soon as they land, they instantly again build up. This is because they're trying to get as high a layer as possible, because if you stay on a low layer, you're going to be really congested with a bunch of other players, and the chance of you swinging from the back side of the zone to the front side successfully is pretty minimal. A good example of this successfully working is in the 7th zone, where you see they just fly using one grapple glove straight to the front side of zone, something that if they had tarped probably would have cost them 300 to 400 materials. You see, the other benefit of staying close to this high layer is the fact that it gives you the opportunity to take height, and the key sign that the team up top doesn't have any materials is the fact that they're actually building in wood rather than brick or metal. Since it's the weakest material, it's the last thing you use, so when players are using it in endgame, it's obvious that they're running low. This means that there's actually an easy opportunity for you to take high ground from them, and the height retake they decide to do is beautiful. Th0masHD sprays out the back of it, again remember it's wood, so it's really easy to chop out, which means that the team on height connects to the builds that Trippern is on. He simply then just edits the players down, and as he does this, builds up himself, so he avoids taking the fight with them, which would be risky, and instead just instantly claimed the high ground for themselves. Now here's where the loadout issues start to play in. They've claimed high ground, however the difficulty is that they're going to struggle to get many eliminations because they do not have any of the high-powered SMGs like a combat SMG or a stinger SMG. The only real spray gun they have is on Trippern, which is the hammer AR, because Th0mas still just has the burst. So the first thing they have to do is ensure that they're always spraying with those ARs anyway, draining a bunch of the materials of the players down low. Then we see Th0masHD drop down, making sure he drops down at the front side of the zone, ensuring he has a great angle on the players at the back side. Timing of this drop's really important because he notices that all of the remaining players are really scuffed down on low ground, because if he just jumped down when there was a bunch of players with healthy materials down there, he could have easily got boxed. So after hitting a massive shot onto Schmecky, Trippern picking up an elimination for himself, Th0mas' aim going so good he even hits Trippern, he uses a small amount of wood just to double ramp over the top of the zone. This ensures that any players that are at the backside can't just ramp over the top of him, essentially blocking them into the backside of the zone. Of course, the remaining player is down low and Trippern picks up the final elimination, winning them the game, and of course, they ended up winning this entire tournament. Like and subscribe.